All right, welcome to the podcast. I'm hosting. We're toasting. Ain't nobody getting.
We're hosting.
Ghosting. Anyway, special guest Mark is on the podcast. Mark, what's up? How's it going?
Hey,
we're just gonna jump into it. And you know what? I'm throwing the script out the window. We don't have one, but if we did, it's out the window. Enough about what we want to talk about.
We don't need a script.
We don't need a script, right? We're not the NFL.
Exactly. The NFL.
I'm just, you know what?
Arguably an organization that uses
Mark.
no script.
Well,
what do you want to talk about today? Let's throw it out there. I usually say like, hey, right, here's the general.
oh boy.
This is what's going to happen. You know, usually I'm like, oh, hey, I ask a question. Silence. I say, weird question, right? They're like, yes. And then they jump into it. Out the window. Script gone. Torn.
You can do like a Mark, tell him why you're mad.
Tell them why you're mad.
Oh my god, I'm mad for so many
Which
reasons.
can go in a variety of
So, you know what?
Also, I'm kind of tired though, and I've been here for several hours, and I haven't eaten anything, so I don't know how mad I'm gonna get. To be perfectly honest.
You know what? What do you guys want to talk about today? I'm just here.
Politics.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna open my mouth there.
Well, first I think a good.
All right, I'll force it. Right, we were talking right before we started was for the last several months you've been using Velocity for your training,
Yes,
and then your tracker broke.
correct.
Tell me the pros and cons of what you've seen from both sides.
That's a good question. No, that's a good question. So I got into velocity-based training. By the way, my name is Mark Doherty.
Yeah, I
For
feel like
those
that
don't know
should-
me, I own Collaborative Strength with my better half, Sophia Veris, if anybody knows her. But yeah, so we've been a company for maybe, I think, going on 4 or 5 years at this point. We primarily coach powerlifters, mostly beginners. But yeah, so that's what I do. Anyways, so back to velocity-based training. Good job introducing me, Sayed.
I was about to.
That was the next thing he was
That was-
That was the fifth question. No, so I've been using velocity-based training for just about 2 years now. And when I first got it, I really thought it was going to like revolutionize my training. I did the VBT course through Reactive Training Systems. And it kind of teaches you how to use an emerging strategies framework with like an individualized table for each lift, which correlates RPEs to certain velocity values. So I thought, I'm going to be able to objectify my RPE. This is going to be incredible, blah, 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 blah. And while, yes, you can do that to an extent, it's a very murky relationship. And it was fun I'm still going to use it. I still have a device, but like Ryan said, it broke recently. And one of the biggest things I've noticed since not using it is that I was basically training like a little bitch. Basically is like the entire premise behind velocity-based training is that you need to move every repetition that you do with maximum concentric intent so you can like accrue accurate data. Because like if you're moving one rep like without maximum intent, and then the next rep, it's like the data is going to be all over the place. So one thing I got in my head a lot with was that reps needed to like move fast and feel fast, especially warm-ups. That's like a big thing in velocity-based training, especially with powerlifting, where like you have these standardized warm-ups. You do the same warm-ups every week, and if the velocity is trending up, you're getting stronger, or you have a higher performance potential for the day. If it's training down, it's obviously the opposite. So I would really get in like, I would hit like these warm-up sets that were like, and we're talking like 60, 70%, right? Where I'm like, oh no, it moved, 0.05 meters per second slower than last week, so I should adjust down. And then I just kind of stopped doing all that when my tracker broke, and I started pushing a lot harder. And it's not really surprising that all 3 lifts are on the rise concurrently. And it's just like, I don't know, I guess it's really kind of highlighted the limitations and the drawbacks of using it the way I was using it. Yeah.
Well, I think like we've talked about this a ton. It's like the velocity, because we've used it in the past a little bit. I've got 3 trackers, and it's like the idea being the objectiveness of the RPE of like, well, I'm going to move an 8 at 0.3, I'm going to move a 9 at 0.24, I'm going to move,
Yep.
That's the idea. But like the problem is it doesn't always play out perfectly.
Nope.
Like you'll move a rep at that speed and be like, oh man, I already hit it. But like then the next rep might not drop as much as it's supposed to. like theoretically, the next rep, you would be from moving from an 8 to a 9, so the velocity should drop from this to this.
Yep.
And then the velocity doesn't drop, and you're like, well, what the fuck?
I mean, usually that's a good thing.
But you're like, that's an 8, and then this one didn't drop. You're like, oh, well, that's an 8.
Well, that's an 8.
Which
yeah.
means that was a 7. So if you called it early, if you called it based on what you thought was an 8, maybe it was only a 7 because maybe the next rep was fine. Or what you would see is sometimes you'd have that rep where it'd be like, this feels like an 8,
Yeah.
and then this all of a sudden you're like, oh
Yeah.
shit, that was a 10.
And I'm sure for people listening can imagine that that's probably not the type of thing you want to be thinking about in the middle of your training session.
right.
You know, you just did a set, you're looking at all this data, it's like extremely overwhelming, and you're trying to like make sense of it while you're in the middle of a training session
Yeah.
and using that to sort of guide what you should do next. And that's just, I've clearly recognized all the drawbacks to doing that. I think moving forward, I'm probably just going to like, I still want the data because I'm a data nerd and I want to be able to compare and contrast it to like in my RPE stuff and my E1RM data. But I'm probably not going to pay much attention to it like during the training session. Like I'm probably not going to sit there and you know, overthink the speed of my warm-ups and things like that, and like, oh, my last warm-up was slower, so I probably shouldn't take the jump I was already originally planning on taking. And like, just do it. Don't really pay attention to it, and you know, go home and do nerd shit with it later.
I think that's the idea, like having as a data point, like if you moved, you scored what, 240 today?
Yeah,
So like, you know, if you hit 240 3 months ago at point
kilograms too. I'm not that weak.
grams, 240 grams.
It's a different kind of sport.
So 240 kilograms. Well, like I said, like let's say you hit that 3 months ago at, I'm making shit up, 0.3.
Yeah.
And then you hit it today at 0.35.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a good sign that you're getting stronger because you're moving it faster.
Yep.
But maybe not the best indicator of what you should do next.
Correct. That's
Like, I think that's what is more like, and you made a comment about this of like whether it being like as a prescriptive or like a reactive kind of thing where if like I'm going to pick numbers based on this velocity or I'm going to just kind of see what everything happened because of like what the velocity is.
You kind of see like after the fact.
Yeah. Like if you, like I said, if you move 240 significantly faster 3 months from now, then you have to know that you got stronger.
Yeah.
But like,
Especially if you're seeing that trend kind of across the board.
right. But to not do the 240 because it might not be fast enough.
Well, that's
in a sport where speed doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so like to take that example, say like my last warm up I did 225. Say that moved a little slower than I expected it to. That's where I would be like, I'm not going to take the jump today.
Right.
When like I was perfectly capable of loading up 240 and squatting 240, and nothing bad happened.
Right.
You know, it's not going to like, maybe it was a little harder than I wanted to be, but like it's not going to take my training for next week. Everything's going to just be fine. So it's like, you know, maybe still base things off your own internal effort scale and like your own, you know, what you think you're capable of on that day instead of just relying on a number. You know, that's where I'm kind of.
And it gets a little because I think like the velocity, like you said before, like you think you're training like a bitch. Like it's something like
for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
I had in that moment.
but like training should be hard.
Yes.
And I think with the velocity tracker, in a good and bad way, it keeps you in a way of not overshooting.
Yep.
Which is probably good.
But it keeps you undershooting.
But you
too.
almost undershoot like all the time.
All the time. Because I'm like, I want to avoid slow reps, hard reps.
So
they got to be
training ends up
fast.
being easier.
And then you don't drive those adaptations that you
Right.
need to actually lift heavy, slow weights efficiently.
Right, because like we said, like on meet day, like it doesn't matter how slow the lift is as long as you get it.
Yep.
And like, yeah, the idea being like, oh, if you move it faster, it was easier, but like, is it? Like maybe you just maybe you put more effort into that rep, and that's what's weird about like, you know, with like watching the warm ups. How you said you have to smash every rep.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the velocities you start getting these weird numbers, and I think of some of our lifters that like every rep looks like a 7 until it's a 10.
Yeah.
Or on the opposite end, every rep looks like a 10, and you can never tell the difference. And like velocity at that point, like it gets a little bit weird because it's like, man, that was slow. And then they do the next rep and like, that was still slow, but like you're like, it moved.
Yeah.
And I know everyone's gonna have their own individual profile, but like there's too much variance rep to rep, and like you said, there's like a 0.04.
Yeah, like a measurement error, like an average measurement.
Yeah, and like the problem is like 0.04 is it's not meaningful, but it is.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about statistics before.
I mean,
like,
based on
that's a decent drop. Like if you're going heavy.
my chart shows that's basically a 1 RPE.
Yeah. So like if you get a measurement error of 0.04.
Which is 1 RPE.
That means you're 1 RPE off every time. That could be huge.
You could be, yeah, very much so.
Like you could be thinking, I'm training at a whole bunch of 8s and 9s, and you're actually training at a whole bunch of 7s.
Yeah.
And like now the training's not as hard.
And that's kind of,
or vice versa. You think you're training a whole bunch of 9s, you're actually training a whole bunch of 10s, and then you're kind of screwed. And like,
well, I think what happened with me was more of the former, where it was like I thought I was doing harder reps than I was. And I just don't think it was stimulating enough to drive any sort of adaptation because my lifts were just stalled out for a while.
Yeah.
And then once the tracker broke and I started pushing a little harder than I probably normally would, everything started to trend up. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to lift a little heavier more often.
And I think like I like the idea of like afterwards, like looking at it, like, okay, I moved 240 at 0.3. 6 months from now, I moved 240 at 0.35.
Yeah, it's just like,
I've
okay, cool. We're going in the right direction.
Right.
That's really all that is.
And that is the more objective.
Yeah, versus like looking at RPE logs.
Right.
Where it's like, well, that's a subjective rating.
Right.
And I could have very well been way off in the moment.
Right. Maybe you had a good day, bad day, or like you were in a good mood, so you're ready to live.
And one thing I do like about the velocity data versus the RPE is like the E1RM charting. Right?
Yeah.
Because like the velocity is going to be a lot more accurate in terms of calculating an E1RM out. Even if it's like off a little bit, it's going to be more accurate than like an E1RM from RPE because that's based on your subjective rating versus like an objective bar speed.
Is there a way that you are like I think when we use that previously and you're saying now like having that dictate your training, is there a way that you'd use it like you keep your warm-ups dictated by the velocity, so you know you're moving your warm-ups fast, but then you take it off and don't let it dictate like your actual working sets? Is there a way you're gonna like change it or find like
I mean, I think
use for it?
I don't think I'm gonna hook it up for my warm-ups. That's what I would really get in my head about because like it was okay if I'm squatting, I'm doing 1 red, 2 red, 3 red. 3 red was like the indicator of performance potential in my head.
Right.
So if 3 reds moved the same or faster than it did the previous session, then I would assume a higher performance potential. If it was slower,
so it would still dictate to a point.
So it would still dictate, my decision making on like what I would do next. And if it was slower, I'd scale back. Mm-hmm. But there's also like a lot of times where like your warm ups are just you're not warmed up yet.
Right.
So like there'd be times where like that value the 3 reds would move slow. And then I'd kind of just override the velocity anyways because I'm like, well, I'm feeling good. Like, because there were times that I would do that. Not all the time, and then things would go fine. Yeah. And then there would be times where like the 3 reds move slow or the 3 reds would move fast. And then I would proceed with the plan and then like top end wouldn't go. Right. So it's like, I don't know. You kind of still need to feel things out and like make decisions, like I said, like based on your own effort scale, like what you think you're capable of, how things feel, like versus just, oh, well, the velocity says to do this today.
Well, that's like we were saying before, like it doesn't matter if you lift fast in powerlifting as long as you lift the weight.
Yeah.
I wonder if like different people, like I think that maybe Alex used it when we first started. He's like a notoriously slow squatter, but it didn't matter because that's how he always squatted.
Yeah.
So was there an actual benefit? Would there be a benefit for a slow lifter to use velocity in order to increase speed?
It's like what Ryan said, like everyone's going to have their own individual profile, which is all based off what the lifter moves a 1RM velocity at. So like if you move a squat 1RM at like 0.15, that's going to dictate like what your 90% is, what your 80% is, what your 70% is, and it's going to change like your RP9, your RP8, like all the speeds change. But if I move, say, a 1RM squat at 0.25, that puts everything higher. Right? So it changes per person.
If we did it, if you use it in a context that didn't dictate your training, could you see it as a useful tool for someone like that? If it was more of like a periodized way, like, all right, we're going to do like a block that's just speed, or we're going to do a day that's just, you think that would
I wouldn't do it like that.
Okay.
I would more so use it like, I mean, it goes back to like using it prescriptively versus like descriptively, where prescriptively is, okay, I want you to hit rep speeds or I want you to hit reps at these particular speeds. Don't go below this threshold. or try to get within these ranges or things like that, which then all the numbers dictate every decision that you make.
Okay.
Versus like where you just kind of hook the tracker up to the bar, do your workout, and then kind of analyze the data afterwards.
That seems like a better.
Yeah, which is what Ryan's example was. Like, okay, you squatted 240 today. If you did it 0.05 meters faster than you did it 3 months ago, and you're seeing that, and it's not just like one. You have to see that consistently.
Yeah.
Like if I keep coming in and moving weights faster than I did 3 months ago, like I know I'm getting stronger without actually having to max out and test.
Right.
I think that's the biggest benefit for all the E1RM, the bar speed, like all of these metrics that we use to kind of track strength trends is like, so we don't have to come in here and max out.
Right.
You know, so we don't have to set up a test, a
could be
1RM
like
test
base
every
rank
12
at
weeks.
least. Yeah.
You know, and like, yeah, we're taking 8s and 9s and things like that, but like, it's not the same as actually maxing your lift.
Right.
And like, yeah, sure, the E1RMs, take those with a grain of salt, but it's still nice to see them trend in a certain direction.
Right.
And that goes like, I think of like, I usually tell people like, you hit a weight once, it's your PR, awesome, that's great. I don't care.
Well, it's not like really.
Maybe you had a great day.
Yeah.
Maybe you slept 10 hours the night before and you ate great and everything's been going well. Maybe you took an extra day off for whatever reason and then you hit this PR. But like, can you do it again? If you can do it again next week or the following, whatever, like now, like, okay, this is probably your new strength standard.
Yeah.
Where maybe it was just a good day. Where that's where I said like, if 240 is a number that you can move fairly regularly. And you go, every few weeks, 240, 240, 240, 240. And then, like, over time, you see 0.3, 0.31, 0.32,
Yeah.
like, in 6 months, like, you're moving it at 0.37.
Yeah, especially
that
where-
240 is now probably 5 times
especially
lower.
where 240, let's say that's like an 8-9, right? You're not going to take that and go, oh, well, it moved faster, so I'm just going to go up now.
Right.
Because now you're going to max out.
Right.
So you could do that consistently, and if like...
And know where you're at.
And kind of know where you're at, yeah.
And that's, I was thinking of a couple things that was like, when I did use ours more way back, one of our lifters was doing it for deadlift, and he was a very slow deadlifter, but it was also like, once he got to a certain point, I knew he was going to get it. And he pulled, like, his first 500 at 0.12. A few weeks later, pulled 512 at, like, 0.07. We were like, holy
that's
shit.
super slow.
Couldn't even believe it moved. But then leading into regionals, his last heavy deadlift, he pulled 518 at 0.08. So I'm like, okay, you got faster and heavier.
Yep.
I'm like, you're going to pull a big number at regionals. And he, like, smoked 540 at regionals.
And that's where you're using it more descriptively.
Right, like that.
Right?
Like,
yeah, you're like looking at the data going, all right, like this probably means this.
right. So, like, I knew, like, going from 500 to 512, like, adding the 5 kilos, yeah, he dropped speed, but he still added that weight. And then, like I said, when a couple weeks later, when he added more weight and got faster, I was like, oh man, when we get rid of some fatigue, it's going to be like, and it was amazing. Like, so that was kind of nice. But I didn't look at it and say, okay, well, you pulled 518 at 0.08. This is our number.
Yeah.
I just used that as like, okay, well, you're getting stronger and getting faster, which means we're getting rid of some of that fatigue. It's going to go up. But what you're saying, like some of the things, the warm ups, like I thought was, I started thinking it was like, well, maybe it can lead you to know like when you're warmed up. Like you said, maybe you're not as warmed up yet, and that's why your warm ups are maybe 380. Maybe 3 reds isn't moving as well as you'd like because you need another warm up or two. Maybe that's a way to use it. Like you can say, okay, now I'm ready. Maybe that would help. I had another one in my brain when you were talking. It's gone.
Well, it plays.
Well, that's
into-
the idea, right? Is to like kind of gauge your readiness for the day.
Yeah.
Like, do I have a high performance potential? Is everything kind of just the same, average? Is it low?
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to be able to do today? And I think I was just relying on the data too much for that. Because, like, even Storm and I were talking about this. Like, he'll come in and hit a last warm-up that's, like, a 9. Because he's just, like, not ready. You know?
Yeah.
And then he'll, like, add 20 kilos and smoke it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so should you let that dictate what you're going to do afterwards?
Oh, this is the one I thought. That's right. So, you said Storm with the back lay. I was thinking with back offs. Like, I think as you're talking more, I'm like, oh, maybe the velocity would be good for the back offs. You have your kind of plan for the day. You hit your number. You hit your 240. But then you say, okay, I'm going to back off. And like we're saying, how the velocity kind of keeps you from overshooting. Mm-hmm. If you say, okay, I'm going to hit my back off sets at 215 now after 240, but if the velocity drops to a certain point there, maybe I'll call that set or adjust the weight based on that because now you're not gonna overshoot your back offs.
Yeah, I think
that's probably where you're even going to get more beat up is when you push that volume. If you're doing a 3x4 back off and you overshoot that, now you're even more beat up.
Yep.
That single, you can probably recover from the single,
Yeah.
as long as it's not too hard. That's what I was kind of thinking about where you're talking about, like, oh, the back off sets might be good for kind of negotiating those a little bit more.
No, I think it's actually, now that you bring that up, I didn't even really consider this, but I've always used velocity I think it's a good way to tell you when to stop the workout.
Yeah.
Because when you start to see, like, you're moving, let's say we go to the 215 to use that example. All right, we're doing the first 2 sets are moving moving this way, and then all of a sudden the third set you just start to see this hard drop. And I know that's the third set you're done anyway, so maybe that's a shitty example. So let's say that happens on the first set.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, ooh, or the second set, right? It just tanks. You're like, well, should I do the third set? You could either drop the weight, you could cut the set, but that kind of tells you, all right, like things are starting to go to crap now.
And that's like in like you said, you brought up RTS before, like with Mike, and Mike's got, if you read his book from the beginning, like from way back, like some of the fatigue drop sets and the way he would do rep drops, weight drops, so all the different things, is like he would say, okay, one of them was you're going to hit your back offs until this weight becomes this RPE, and depending on how conditioned you are, it might only be 1 set. It might be 8 sets depending on where you are, and that's the problem is like. The velocity kind of gives you that more objective scale of like, okay, I'm moving this pretty well, This one dropped a little bit, that's fine.
At that point,
off.
things are going to feel hard no matter what.
Right.
So it's nice to have that objectivity.
Right. And then once you drop off that hard, you're not coming back from that.
No, you're better off
I don't care how much you amp yourself up for the next set, it's going to be shit. So just
and plus, what that's indicating is you're highly fatigued. If you see like a large drop in velocity, lots of velocity loss over the course of a set, like that's indicating that you're really fatigued. And you should probably just stop or back the weight off significantly before you just run yourself into the ground. It's funny that you mentioned Mike. So I was listening to an RTS podcast. This was when I was like deep into the, using the charts and all this stuff, right? And him and Rob, and this was actually, I think this was an episode with the Landon Hickmott, who wrote the course, the VBT course that they did for them. And it was like him, Ross, and I think, oh my God, I'm blanking. I just said his name, Landon. Oh my God. So they're talking, and I'm like, I'm all gung-ho into the charts and using it to objectify RPE, and I'm using the velocity loss stops, and Mike's like, yeah, I don't really like using it that way.
Didn't they trash it that time? I listened to that one too.
I was like, annoyed on the other end. Like, I just paid $500 for the course, Mike. And Mike's like, yeah, I don't use it that way. Like, Mike uses it descriptively. Like, Mike tracks all his reps, but he looks at the data later and does whatever he does with the data later. But it's not like, he's not using it to make decisions. Right. He's using RPE.
Right.
And it was just funny, like, thinking about that, how I was, like, so annoyed that I was like, no, this is the way. You taught it to me, And now I'm finally come full circle where I'm like, man, he was right.
Yeah. But that's even, like, where I've argued on here several times, like, against RPE, but that's still, like, how I use percentages first and foremost. And then RPE to me is not prescriptive. It's descriptive. Like I care what your RPE was for that set, but I'm not using it for you to call that number. Like, I'm
going to be perfectly honest. Like, I rarely ever rack the bar and go, how many reps did I have left?
Yeah.
And how is that going to dictate my net? Like, I'm like, okay, I'm probably good for this on the next set.
Yeah.
Like, that was easy. I'm going to go up 5 or 10 kilos.
Yeah.
I'm not like, well, if I had 1 rep or 2 reps, that means I'm going to go up 3% or 4% or 6%. It's like,
right. I think it gets a little
I don't know. I'm
weird.
just not doing that math in the session. Like, I'm just kind of, okay, that was this hard.
Right.
That wasn't hard enough, or that was maybe it was a little too hard. I could go up, but I'm going to take a smaller jump.
Right. I think it gets a little weird with that stuff. It's like, so that's where you get people that like are chronic undershooters.
Yeah.
That are like, oh man, that was an 8. I got to call it there. I'm like, man, that wasn't that hard.
That wasn't.
Or vice versa. They're like, that was a 6. I'm going to go up.
And it was like a 9.
Where like that's why I kind of like percentages of like there's a little bit more set in stone, but then you kind of make the adjustment from there. Like you say, like, okay, I'm going to move 85% today. And as you're working up, you're like, ooh, that felt atrocious. Then maybe you can make a small change, but you don't. I don't like it where it's like same thing velocity RP, where it's like as you're working up, like, oh, based on that speed, I'm only going to do this number.
Did you ever use comp maxes?
So
Because somebody asked me about that, and I don't use much percentage-based training, but I was thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, I wonder if comp maxes like do make a lot of sense for like in the gym writing percentage-based training, because like the issue with percentage-based training is the 1RM fluctuates. Right. So like, yeah, you probably get away with 70-75% any day easy, but like once you start creeping up 80-85%, if your 1RM's down 5 to 10%, now your 80 to 85 is 90 to 95.
Right.
So it's like if you just drop the comp max 10 kilos.
Right. So
or based on a percentage or something.
Right. Like I know we've talked about this like off camera. What I'll do is like I'll take, like let's say you hit 250 as your comp max, then I'm gonna use 250 as the programming number for the next block of percentage. But I'm going to adjust everything down a little bit.
That's fair.
So instead of RP 10 being 100%, I'm going to program RP
95.
10 as like 96.
Okay, fair enough.
95.5 I think is what RP
I think,
9.
honestly,
I think if you look at the RP chart, like RP 9 is 95.5 and RP 8 is 92.2.
Yeah.
So like I'll make the RP 9 a 10, the 8 a 9. So now everything
think that's
is
reasonable.
So I've just basically dropped everything 4.5%.
Yeah, because I don't really think you're going to see any larger fluctuations than like 5% on average.
No.
Like if you're extremely fatigued,
There's something going on.
Like like there's going to be the outlier that their 1RM drops 15% one session, but like that's not that common.
Something weird.
That's not an average. Yeah.
And I think the 4.5% almost
that's
takes care of the
perfectly
meat
reasonable.
atmosphere.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, you're in the gym training, like that 4.5% disappears because you're not in the meat. But then then I give some like leeway on what we're gonna do from there, and if you're feeling good, then and you've got that full strength of that 100%, then like we can kind of push from there.
Yep.
But on a day that you're off, you feel like
that probably kind of works out.
Yeah, like on the day that you're off, you're like, well, I hit the planned number, and it's like, and that way you didn't overshoot, even though like I said, I kind of auto adjusted it without saying it. So if anyone listens to this, now you know I'm lying to you. But that's kind of how I make sure that we don't overshoot. And because I find like if you do program percentages off your comp max, very quickly that goes bad.
Yeah.
Because like it's your comp max for a reason. It's not your training max. And like, yeah, I understand that in training maybe you'll hit a new training max, but it's that to me, the way I program is like the training maxes should be still probably below the PR of the meet until we get very close to the meet, and then hopefully we can push it, and then hopefully the meet PR is even bigger. But like I said, if you go into meet and hit 270, that you've hit once, and then on the next week I start programming everything off 270.
Right. And now and now everything's up, volume's up,
intensity's up, and within like a month you're like, yo, I'm dying.
Yeah.
And like that's what we talked about before, is like building up that conditioning is important, but you have to be smart about it. You can't do it at a level that like you're not prepared for.
Yeah.
And I actually mentioned this the other day. It was like one of our lifters in the past, like and that's why I don't do this anymore. Is like I made this mistake where she was in training, getting ready for nationals, and everything was going like really well, like so well that she hit like all her PRs happened in the gym, fairly far out from nationals. So I took her. We were programming her squat off of 275 pounds.
That's a strong girl.
And she hit 300 in training. So I immediately adjusted all of her training off of a 300 max. And within about 4 weeks, she was dying and then didn't squat 300 at Nats. Where I'm very certain if we just kept going off 275, we would have had that kind of steady wave the whole way in and probably would have squatted 308 to 314 at Nats. Yeah. Instead, because I jumped it 25 pounds, when I look back at it, I'm like, man, that's a lot of extra volume. Yeah. That's a lot of extra intensity. And she, even though she was strong enough to hit 300 at the gym, she wasn't prepared enough to do that much extra volume. Mm-hmm. And it backfired. Yeah. And I think she squatted, it was either 292 or 297 at nationals, where it should have been more than that. Yep. So like, yeah, I use the comp max because like it's the, or the, whatever the number is.
Well, I mean, you just drop it down.
Yeah.
Which I think is perfectly reasonable.
If you only did it once, it's like, it might have just been a good day. Maybe we, like on a comp, like, yeah, we peaked you for that singular moment in time to hit this number. It's almost not real.
Yeah.
6 weeks later when you're into a fatigue block, like you're not going to be able to hit that again.
We're doing fatigue blocks.
Yes,
now. Not just singles. We're doing fatigue blocks around here.
It's going to feel really good.
We do a primer block before it. We just fatigue the shit
on our octenary squat.
Squat 8 days a week.
I feel like
I hate
I hate it here.
I'm so old.
I feel like based off that, like there's so rare. It's so rarely a time when we like adjust a plan where it's like, all right, we have this plan leading up to this meet, or we're like, it's going really fucking good. I'm gonna change it and like up your max, up your volume, where that pays off, and like it never pays off.
It never does.
So like, and I even like, because when I program, I'll program
Usually,
for a lot of
most
things.
people need to do less.
Exactly. Yeah. I know. I've
Except
even
for me when I was
struggled
being a
with
bitch.
You're the anomaly. Where I'll start with this is the percentage. Where here's your starting point, and I'll be like, I'll give people the option. You can work up. But I'll give an RIR constraint. Like, don't go over this, which is wildly different for some people. So I'll change based off that. Sometimes I'm like, man, you went up like 15%. Like, that's way too much. But like, that's our plan. This is who you are. If you think that I'm making you undershoot consistently, and you're on the opposite side of the spectrum, you're exactly where I want you to be. Like, that's one person, so like that changed vastly because other people will be the opposite. And it's like, it's very often we're like, oh man, today wasn't good. And I was like, what happened? They're like, oh, I only squatted the weight that you prescribed. I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Things are great. Shut the fuck up.
Like,
but
you had an option if things were like going really well that day, but like you still did what I wanted you to do.
Right.
So
it's just funny how people interpret that.
Yeah.
And that's the way like we program that. Like on those heavier days, we give those options that they can work up. And like we've talked, like I've changed it where now it's like you can go up, but you have to go up by minimum this much.
Yeah.
Which makes them either be like, whoa, if I go up that's gonna be hard. Which means they usually stop. Which means they either did what I wanted or they undershot a little bit, which is fine. Or they're like, I've got this. Which means that now they're going in very confident to this big number, which is probably going to be a PR at that point.
I mean, I would rather you do that than take a 2.5 kilo jump.
Well, that's like, I've gotten to the point where like
you might as well just repeat the same way.
Right, don't do it. Like if you're only going to go up 2.5, like that's for meet day, fine. You're going to go up 2.5. In training,
that's different.
In training, like depending on who you are, like
unless you're not a 100-pound female with like a 100-pound bench.
Right, like I've got people's programs like you can go up, you have to make a minimum 12.5 kilo jump, and they're like, whoa, and then they do it, and they're like, that was fine. But
that
like at
happened
their strength
yesterday.
level, it's fine.
That happened yesterday, and that's the thing. I think like when you start to come up with this stuff, that was like I think I've seen positives from every direction. That happened to Luke was in here benching, and he's like, I don't know if I can do it this weight. It was a triple, and he's like, I think I probably get it for a single. I'm like, well then just get it for a single if that happens. And then he hit it for a triple, and I was like, dude, you would never go to that and hit that set, which was great for you in training, if there wasn't that force constraint, like you have to go to this. Because you would have hit 2 kilos and easily maybe you stopped. But it forced you to hit the weight. That was probably a PR triple because of that. And I think that's been really beneficial for us using that scheme because like it affects people differently, but like you have to do this and it puts you in areas where you might not have gone.
That's a good idea. I like that idea because a lot of times people just won't take those bigger jumps.
Yeah.
They're afraid.
Yeah.
Like I love taking big jumps. Like I went 170, 210, 225, 240 today.
Fuck the world.
Like, and I told that to one of my lifters and he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, dude.
But
like
that's also like not crazy.
It's
like,
not crazy.
What's your best right now? 250?
250. I go, dude, 15 kilos is like 6%. Like it's not.
So 240 is 96%, which if we were talking about on meet day, that would be your second attempt if you're going for 250, and you took 225 before that.
Yep. Not quite correct.
That's 90%.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable.
That's like, so okay, on meet day, I'd probably have to go 227. Go 227, 240, 250. But like, that's if you ask most people, if you said 90%, 96%, 100%, they'd be like, oh yeah, opener, second, third.
That's reasonable.
So why?
It's just people hear like
training
15 kilo
yeah.
jump and they're like, oh, that's huge. It's like, okay, well, Ashton Rushka takes 90-pound jumps. Like,
we were talking about like
the more weight you lift, the bigger you can jump because like if you consider the percentage of your 1 rep max, like the jump, like what is 15 kilos relative to my 1 rep? It's like 6%.
Right.
It's not that big of a jump.
The year that Ray Williams squatted like, I don't know if it was like 1060 at that meet, I forget what it was, and we were sitting in the crowd and like he opened it like 980 and people were like, how is he gonna get there? I'm like, Because he squats 1,060. So a 5% jump, like, yeah, it's your 5% and my 5%. It's still 5%. The difference is for him, it's 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Like,
Plus, he's probably taking like he's probably going like two, like, you know,
two reds every
two,
jump.
like, like every jump taking
Well,
like
that's
two
like-
reds on each side,
right,
not
like-
like one, like plate jumps.
right. I mean, like, I help.
Imagine how fatigued he would be if he just did like one
I
red,
only do
2
5
red,
kilo
3
jumps.
red, 4 red, like he would
10
be
red,
fucking
12 red,
dude,
like, you know.
he would be
So in
fucking,
shape.
he'd be like, oh my god, I can't keep doing this.
Well, it's like I think about a couple years ago, I helped out a lifter at nationals that like is a very heavy squatter, like in the mid 8s, and they were asking me like for the warm up attempts, and I was like, whoa, I've never written a warm up that high before. I don't know. And I started doing the math out for what I would normally call for attempts, and I was like, this is insane. And I looked at him and said, you good going from the bar right to 2 reds? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right. To 4 reds? He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my god, he's gonna die. And like, he actually was fine because like,
of course,
because
he squats
840.
Yeah.
But like in my mind, I was like, oh my god, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like, but afterwards, it's like, well, when you think 4 reds, no collar, like it's like 55, 56% for him. I'm like, that would be most of us squatting mid 2s. That's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
I was like, he'll be fine. And he was, and he went 9 for 9 that day. It was great. But like literally, I was like writing the numbers out, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna kill this guy. I'm terrified.
I mean, I think people would even think me going 170 to 210 would be a lot.
But it's, I mean, we do this all the time. I think I have this discussion at meets all the time. People have this number, like, I never take, 10 kilo jumps. I don't do it. There's like, a number out of context is just a fucking number. Like, it's just weight. Like, you just have this number, like, I won't go over 5 kilos, or I won't go over. And like, some senses, like, yes, I see sometimes with like bench. Like, I get like 2 kilo jump, makes sense. I'm not gonna have you jump 2 kilos. But it's so rare of a occurrence where like, man, he should really go 12 kilos and not 15. And like, it's a fucking max attempt. At that point, it doesn't matter.
At that point, it doesn't matter.
It's just like a number.
No,
for
I
the sake of a number.
mean, you jump from 68% to 84%. Like, it's a big jump, but it's also not an insane jump.
Yeah, and it's also saving me energy.
Like, would it have made more mathematical sense for you to make a little bit of a smaller jump instead of going from 68 to 84, and then 84 to 90? Because that was 16 to 6.
Yeah.
Maybe if you went 14 to 8. Maybe would have made that one feel a little bit better, but like...
Well, the thing is
we're
like
also-
210 actually felt amazing.
We're also splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah.
That like, if you went 205 instead...
Yeah, it's like...
Would it have been that big of a difference? Like,
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know, like...
And it moved so well that I was like, perfect.
Right. And that's what someone made a post the other day about, like, at meet days. And
I didn't waste any energy on, 190, 200,
Yeah.
doing fucking 4 sets in between. Like, just
Right.
just take the jump, dude.
Right.
Like, you can do it.
We were talking about, like, for meet days where, like, when people are warming up, and I said, like, I showed, like, percentages for, like, the warm-ups. I was like, this is what I would do. I said, but honestly, what I would do from here is, like, this says 67.5. Just pick 65 or 70, just for loading purposes. I was like, just go...
Well, it depends on what that corresponds
right.
to.
And I said, like, when you get up to these last 2, then I need you to be hyper-specific. Like, when you're taking your last couple warm-up singles, those, use the 1 1/4, that's fine. But, like, up here, I don't use 1 1/4.
Yeah.
Don't even use 2 1/2.
Yeah, like if your 67.5% is like 212 12 and a half kilos,
Round
it's like,
up.
dude,
Or
just
round- I don't care.
one or the
Right.
other. Like,
Yeah.
just...
And that's where it gets a little bit weird, is, like, you have to kind of figure out what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
But, like, at those numbers, like I said, the difference between 205 and 210 for you, so is it 83% or 84%?
Yeah, it's meaningless.
You're gonna move it no matter what.
Yeah.
But again, when you got up to 240,
Well, yeah.
that matters more. Like,
A lot.
240 to 242, that's a decent difference.
Yep.
That drives me crazy at meets and warm-ups. I don't know if that, but like, I think you changing it, we were trying out, like, you get the signed rack, made it easier, but like, I can't stand if, like, all right, we're going red. Are you good with the red? I'm gonna go a yellow too. I'm like, hey, shut the fuck up. We're like, just like, we're in this together now. Like,
Yes.
we're gonna do the same thing.
Teamwork.
I don't want to strip this off for this, and it's just, just.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. But like the last few make sense. Where we've gotten like people say like you don't need 1 quarterback. Like we'll get specific for the last thing because that'll
It's
matter.
like warming up for deadlift. They're like, "You're cool with the reds?" Like, I really wanted to start with the blue. It's like, no.
Well, you're not. Yeah.
I'm sorry. We don't use blues around here anyway. So
But also, like, you're right. Like, I mean, if you're gonna go up there, if you're pulling 5 reds, what, like, warming up with 2.5 kilo difference
It doesn't matter at all.
is meaningless.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would even argue
if I
towards.
blindfolded you, you wouldn't even know what
I
was
would
on the
even
bar.
argue towards those. If you pull at least 500 pounds, those last couple warm ups don't matter either.
Yeah, like, you're
a
not-
2.5 kilos, 5.5 pounds. Like that's not going to make a massive difference.
Right, you're barely going to notice.
Especially if you're opening with 500.
Right,
So it means you're mid fives.
right. You're not even going to feel it.
You're going to be fine. I think people just get in their own heads about these weights and how they're going to feel, and relative to what they normally do. And if it's bigger, they assume it's going to feel way worse and it's going to be harder. And,
Right.
It's just your perception's a motherfucker when it comes to this shit.
And that's what we talk about. Like it's so much psychological. Like
so
me getting
much.
people to understand. Like it's okay to jump 7.5. You don't have to jump 5 every time. Like you're strong enough to jump 7.5, and making that jump means we can open you a little bit lighter. Make that jump, which means this one you smoked, which now you've got more confidence going in. Your second one is probably better than it would have been if you only made the smaller jump, and now you're more likely to hit your third.
Yeah.
It's okay to like make that jump.
And I don't think people.
But now what I'm doing is I'm forcing them to do it in training.
Yep.
So it's less scary on meet day.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say, like being scared, like being anxious. I don't think lifters realize how much that actually affects their performance.
Yeah.
Like them being super anxious about stuff and overthinking every little aspect of what they're doing, that's gonna reduce your output.
Right. And RP7 doesn't scare you. So that
shouldn't.
But that's like the going all the way back to like training hard is like I shit on people constantly for this, but like that 4x4 at 7 idea. None of those reps are hard. Like the last one is maybe a little hard. But like but that first rep is an RP4. You don't need to have any mental stimulation to get under that bar, you're just fine. But then on meet day, when you have to take your opener, which is going to be at RP 8 or 9, and you can see them, they look almost like visibly scared.
Yeah.
And then a 10 is like they don't know how to handle it. Like there's something to me now. I'm not saying you do a 10 in training all the time, but like you need to know where that psychological arousal is. That like you can go in and blast this because a 4x4 at 7 is not gonna do that to you.
Well, people we were talking about this earlier in the week, and it's something I always bring up when we're talking about specificity. I love adding the psychological component to like the specificity of the environment and how loading a 1RM or even just like 90-95%, like how that makes you feel inside versus like when you see 70% of the bar or 75%. There is a way different feeling, a way different perception. Like you're way more emotional, anxious, like depending on how, obviously the emotions are going to change per person and how, the magnitude of the emotions are going to vary per person, but it's like, it's scary when you got, 100% loaded, you're going to put it on your back, you got to take it down to depth, like all of that, perception is going to influence your actual behavior when you get under the barbell. So like, are you timid? Are you even confident you could even do this weight? Because if you're lacking confidence, like you hear it all the time, like, I don't know if I'm going to get this weight. It's like, you already kind of failed.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble if you're going into the lift and you think like you're unsure if you're going to do it.
Yeah. I always see the other day, like with the one with people that like when they take squats, and you'll see them at 70%, it's just like down and up, 75% down and up, 80% down and up, 85% down, up easy because it's still only 85%, and then 90% they slow down even more. It's like no, you need to be
now
able
you get no pop out of the hole.
Right now you need to be able to take 95%
more aggressive
the way you take 75%.
Yeah.
You don't need to slow it down, and that's not physical. Like,
no, that's 100% mental.
You didn't slow it down because physically would made more sense to move it as fast as humanly possible. Yeah. But because you're scared of the weight, you start to slow it down. So like this goes back to training hard. Like you have to do some hard shit in training to be able to get under the bar on meet day and not shit yourself.
Well, if we want to just talk about like the physiology aspect of it, is like your body needs to learn how to coordinate efficient movement patterns under these max loads, and it cannot learn how to do that without the max loads because the psychological piece plays a big role because like that's going to influence like how efficient you are under the barbell. So like the more confident you are, like the harder you hammer that stuff,
right.
like the more efficient, like your body's going to just learn how to do that and coordinate that task so much better.
Yeah.
Like, and I've struggled with that with bench press. Like with squatting, I'm a dive bomb squatter because I know how much it helps me, and I always say like dive bombing's an art because I truly think it is. Like, it's tough. Like if you don't know how to do that, it's tough to do it with a max load on your back. But like
right.
once you actually let gravity help you, you just boom, and you just fly through sticking points. And I'm like, I remember the first time that happened, I was like, oh my God, I've unlocked, like new levels unlocked, you know? But then like with bench, I'm like a little baby.
Yeah,
you know, as soon as I get something heavy, I'm like, oh my God. You know, and I've been trying to get better about that because when I do like, and I'm like, just get after it, you know, and I bring it down, like it just pops right off my chest. And I'm like, because you're wasting so much energy on the eccentric, like, especially with like a max load, you know, it's so fatiguing on the eccentric that you just don't have that same pop.
Right.
And you don't have the energy. Like, because you got to think of like the actual energy systems, like it's such a short, it doesn't give you much. You know, so it's like if you're taking 6 seconds to lower the friggin' barbell, by the time it's like,
you're done.
Nah, your ATP's gone, buddy. Yeah. Like, you're done. Like, just
actively thinking
Should we talk
about
about
the
the
Krebs
Krebs
cycle.
cycle?
yeah. I can't believe we brought it up on the podcast.
Any of you that are in this field, the Krebs cycle is bullshit. No one cares.
ATP is cool.
It's probably a good place to call this one. Do you guys have anything else? I that was a lot. Like,
I think that was good.
I mean, we'll definitely have you back for another one. But
thank you, Sam.
Yes, I've contributed a lot to this conversation.
Well, I feel like you two have a podcast every day. You come in.
We do. I know. I already knew that.
About midway through, I was like, we should just hit record more often.
Yeah.
I was like already.
you up
That's what I
every
was
day.
already anticipating. We're just gonna have the same conversation
Yeah.
we have every day.
We could probably do that.
But
Yeah, 4 days a week.
in terms of this is now, I say this with everyone, this is your time, we're here for you. Anything you want to plug, you got your time right now.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my business, Collaborative Strength, my meme page, Certified Personnel Truths.
Where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, that's where you can find me. You
Yeah.
can find me at Mark_Collaborative Strength, our team page, Collaborative Strength, and my meme page at Certified Personnel Truths. And I mean, I'll shout out White Toe for Yuli and Mateo. So like, and you can use my discount code. I have a discount code. Certified 10, baby. Use that to get 10%
They didn't
off
give
your
you,
White
like-
Toe products.
Certified 10. They didn't give you like meme lorb 20. Like
I don't get anything for it. I plug their shit because they're my boys.
huge
That's all.
kickbacks. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
wearing their shoes right now.
I am, I know.
Because the new ones are super fucking comfortable.
They are comfortable, but I wore duck boots in. I can't. I'm not
Yeah,
wearing
that's
duck boots around.
Way to
the
end the
gym.
podcast. High fives.
Yeah, way to go Krebs.
Go Krebs.
1, 2, 3 Krebs.